Welcome all to today's session on measuring food safety culture. First of all, a brief introduction to myself. My name is Ringaile Bulatovic-Schumer, and I manage the Culture Excellence Program here at PSI. I have a background in European studies and international studies from the UK and Denmark. And for the last 10 years, I've been working within academia, industry, and government on many issues related to organizational culture. My specialty and primary focus has been on national culture and organizations and the effect that national culture has on them. I work for a company called Taylor Shannon International, and we have been established now for 10 years here in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The company has been created by a team of PhD qualified safety and quality management experts. And what we do is that we run national safety and quality programs in multiple countries. And obviously, we're also behind the Culture Excellence Program, which we have launched 5 years ago. So first of all, we need to talk a little bit about definitions. It depends who you ask, you will get a different answer of what is understood by culture and in particular organizational culture. But from our perspective, what we want to find out are the prevailing attitudes and practices related to food safety that are taught directly and indirectly to employees. So one way to look at it is that culture shapes how people feel, it shapes how people think, and just as important, it shapes how people act. So when it comes to food safety culture, it's in relation to that, and that's what we're going to be finding out. Now, obviously, this is quite the challenge because, first of all, culture as a discipline is multidisciplinary. So you have to understand certain scientific terms. You have to know how management works. You have to know about basic human psychology, and you have to understand how all of these three interlink together. Also, culture is multi-layered. So we talk about the culture above the surface and the culture below the surface, as defined by the culture guru, Edgar Schein. Now, one way of looking at it is that what you see at the top are the artifacts. So these are the things you see with the naked eye. In a food safety environment, that could be things like uniforms, equipment, just things you can easily spot. Underneath, though, is what really shapes your organizational culture. But those are not the things that you can see. They are hidden. They're below the surface. So first of all, we need to look at the spoken values. So what is said between managers and employees? What is management communicating to the employees? What are the employees saying to each other, perhaps in break time? And deeper under that still are the underlying values. So these are the things that will actually have the biggest effect on your organizational culture. One way to look at it is like this. Imagine you go into an organization and on the wall you see very, very nice posters. Everyone has great clean uniforms. The equipment is perfect, nothing wrong. Those would be the artifacts. Then you're looking at the communication between managers and employees. And management is always sending out messages that food safety is number one, food safety is number one, we need to prioritize food safety. But then something happens and say your production targets are suddenly under very severe pressure. And suddenly there's not so much talk about food safety anymore. And it's not really spoken about. And people are cutting corners and no one's noticing and no one's saying anything. Those will be your underlying values, and those values will shape your food safety culture more than anything else, and that's where also your danger will come from. So they're mostly invisible, and obviously there will be a big challenge for audit and inspection to find out and locate, and because of that, different methods are needed. Now, the journey in our company has been quite a long one. So we started in 1999 doing psychological research in the food industry with University of Central Lancashire, where we were looking to find out what makes people do the right thing in the food safety context. Then we continued doing mixed method research projects with University of Salford and the FSA through the early 2000s. In 2010, we launched mixed method case studies with HCT and the UAE municipality, continuing our work with governments and higher education facilities. And in 2012, we did a qualitative on-site culture assessment with some of our biggest industry clients. This has led to us launching the program in 2014 in cooperation with Camden BRI, and in 2015 with BRC Global Standards. So behind our work within food safety culture, we have research and development that spans more than 20 years and across 40 countries. So for the last 20 years, here at PSI, we have been researching and developing a tangible model of what is incorporated into the idea of safety culture. And we have come up with these 4 categories: purpose, process, people, and productivity. And each category has 5 dimensions. So we're looking at 4 categories and 20 dimensions. And each of them is assessed, and also each of them is as important as the next when it comes to organizational culture, and specifically when it comes to food safety culture. So let's look at the categories. First of all, we have people. So when it comes to people, what we want to look at is how are people empowered? Do they have the authority to do the right thing? We also want to look at reward. So are people sufficiently rewarded, not just in terms of the finances, but also are they thanked and are they recognized when they do a good job? We also look at teamwork. So what kind of teamwork do you have in your organization, and does that teamwork facilitate or hinder food safety in the company? We also look at training. So training is one of those dimensions that is obviously extremely crucial, because we need to look at both the frequency of the training, but also if it has the right impact. And then finally, we have communication. And communication is a little similar to training in that we assess with frequency as well as impact. The next category in our culture program is process. So process relates to the internal mechanisms of the organization, and it's first being management control. So in relation to safety, this relates to how are people supervised, how are they disciplined, and if the workload is balanced. Then we have coordination. So this is both across departments as well as the different sites. And also we're looking at how is it communicating and working well together despite potentially conflicting priorities. We also look at consistency. So how are standards and systems implemented over a period of time? Are they consistent between shifts? Are they consistent between people? And does nothing change before an external audit, for example? Then we have systems. So this will obviously not be for technical validity, because you do that in a traditional audit, but more, how do people perceive the systems that are in place? Are they user-friendly, non-burdensome? And then we have premises. So premises relates to people's perception of the space and facilities that they have around them, and whether they feel it helps or hinders them in relation to safety in your organization. The next category is purpose. So this relates to the long-term vision or goals and extent to which safety form a part of those. Then we have values. So these are the core values, things that are always prioritized, and the extent to which, again, safety is understood to be a part of it. Then we have strategy. So strategy relates to the plans that are in place to make the vision happen, and also does the strategy promote safety improvements across the company. Then we've got targets. These are the shorter term targets, or if you'd like, the day-to-day goals that people are given, and again, the way that safety fits in with them. And then we have metrics. So metrics relates to what business measures and what it does with the data that it gathers. Then we have proactivity. So first of all, we have the external awareness dimension. So this relates to customers, competitors, suppliers, changes in the organization, and how do the events on the outside affect the organization on the inside. We have risk foresight, a very, very crucial dimension, because risk foresight looks at if people know what the risks are in relation to safety, and also, just as important, do they take them seriously? We also look at organizational learning. So for example, if there is an incident or a corrective action perhaps is required, does the organization learn, and does it ensure it does not happen again? And finally, we have investment. So here what we'll look at, what does the company invest in, and also how does the organization allocate their budget? So these 4 categories and 20 dimensions are all assessed in our culture platform. And what it does is that it allows companies to see if they are stronger in one category than another. So perhaps people have been a strong focus, potentially at the cost of process, Or maybe it's the other way around, where internal processes have been strongly focused on, but maybe not so much productivity. And of course, we also look within the categories as well. So again, maybe innovation is very strong, but risk foresight is lower. And what we're looking at there is to see how all of this links together, and that allows us to give you an appraisal of your organizational culture. Now, what we have noticed, and we've been doing this for quite a while now, of course, is that companies that are established for a long time, they tend to be very strong in process and purpose. And companies that are newer and smaller, they tend to do better in people and productivity. Of course, there's no one glove that fits everyone, and everyone is on their own unique journey when it comes to organizational culture. Now, what we also have is our maturity model that allows you to see where it is that you fall when it comes to organizational culture. So our scores are out of 100, and the companies that score between 85 and 100, we categorize them as the leaders, and they fall obviously in the leader category. Scores between 70% and 84 are what we call the progressive scores, and that's also where the majority of the companies that take the survey, especially in the first year, that's where they land. Our current average is 74%. Then we have the committed category between 55% and 69%, the developing between 40 and 54%, and the reactive between 20% and 39%. And as you may notice, the language is obviously very positive, and that's because being on a culture journey is supposed to be a positive process that helps you. So it's not to demoralize anybody if they're not the leader or in a progressive category. It really is about helping them getting there in time. Now, a program is divided into 4 parts, where we are obviously strongly involved with the preparation, assessment, and reporting, and we help our clients along the way there. But when it comes to the improvement part, that really does depend on each company, what it is that they want to do and how it is that they want to do it. And because we're not strongly involved in the improvement part, this also allows us to have the assessment be very cost effective. Now, the assessment itself, sometimes people may ask about certain questions regarding the credibility. From our perspective, what we want people to understand is that the survey has been expertly developed, meaning that not one question is not based on anything that we have made up. So everything is based on original research data that we have studied and analyzed and worked with for the last 20 years. Everything is validated by experts in the industry. Everything is also validated by literature that exists to this day. And of course, also we make sure that we publish in academic literature as well. This is because when it comes to organizational culture, this is a field that has been studied for the last 30, 40 years. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of different theories. But when it comes to food safety culture, it really is still quite a nascent subject. And for us, it's very important to share our findings with the rest of the food safety community. Now, another thing that we want to emphasize when it comes to the survey is also its very unique psychological design. And what we mean by that is that we are very aware of how to ask questions that elicit honesty, but also minimizes whatever concerns people may have. So none of the questions are random. We've really even thought about where does each word go to make sure that it is understood by as many people as possible and that it doesn't cause any confusion. It's not meant in any way to trick people. It's not meant to ask people to recall things that are difficult to remember or anything like that. It's just meant to get people's honest opinions about their organizational culture. We also get asked, of course, a lot of questions about the practicality of the survey. So the first thing that we want to stress is that it is completely anonymous, meaning that we do not store any data that can identify employees. So we don't ask for their emails, we don't ask for their names or anything like that. And also on the reporting platform that we have, we also make sure that we don't see the results unless 4 people fulfill the demographic filters. The questions that you will be asked as well, they are role-based, meaning that managers and supervisors, they will get additional questions that are not asked of operator-level employees for the very obvious reason that they will have extra insight into their culture that is not available necessarily to the operator level employees. The survey can be taken on any computer, tablet, or phone, so pretty much any device that has access to the internet. It's available now in more than 45 languages, and so it has a very true global reach. And also, it takes approximately 15 minutes to do. The 15 minutes is something that we feel is important to communicate to people that are taking the survey, just to set the expectations right and not frustrate anybody if they, spending 14 minutes and their colleagues are spending 8. So always good to say that. Now the reporting. So once you have done the assessment, you've had all your employees take it, or you have reached the minimum targets that were set for you, what you will get is a standard module PDF. So this PDF, it will tell you your main data. It will give you a score for each category and each dimension. It will also show you your highest scoring elements. Your elements are actually your questions, phrases, statements. So we'll show you your highest scoring elements. It will also show you a couple of your lowest scoring elements. It would also help show you your positives when it comes to your culture. So what do people identify works particularly well in your organization, as well as your barriers. So what are the things that people have identified that work perhaps a little bit less well? So you can look into those as well. You will also, of course, have possibility to upgrade to our own online platform. And our online platform provides you with a lot more information, and actually has more than 500 data points available to you, where you are then able to both filter by role, by site. You'll be able to see all of your strengths and all of your weaknesses. You'll be able to see your risks, your priorities, industry benchmarking, and a lot of additional views. So of course, we always recommend our clients to do the upgrade, just because they get a lot more information, which makes planning for improvement obviously a little bit easier. Now, when it comes to culture change, so you've done the assessment, you've gotten your results, you're looking at them, and now you have to think a little bit, how do you implement change in your organization? What are the next steps? What it is that you can do? So this is some suggestions of how you could use your scores to move that change forward and to implement meaningful change in your organization in relation to food safety. So first of all, the very first thing you should do is identify areas for change. This goes without saying. You need to know where your risks are. You need to understand where you would like to improve. So by using your report scores, obviously our suggestion would be look at the lowest scoring dimensions, look at the lowest scoring elements, and those could be the areas of change that you would like to work with as sort of the low-hanging fruit. Then, of course, you have to create a case for this change. So you have to look at both what kind of a risk does that pose for you to have those scores be low, and also what kind of impact would it have for you to improve on those scores. Then what you need to do is you need to identify the leaders and the champions that are going to help you drive the change forward. Always remember, culture is not a solitary thing, right? It's not something that people have by themselves. Culture is something that we share. So we need more people involved at any given time. So one of my favorite quotes by Cotter, who is a very well-known leader when it comes to organizational change, is that you need a team to be able to drive the change. One person, even a terrific, charismatic leader, is never strong enough to make all this happen. And of course, this is also true for food safety culture. So identify your leaders, identify your champions, and make sure that they work together to implement the change that you need to do. Then you need to develop an action plan. So again, using your scores, you can look at, for example, your lowest scoring elements, and then you can decide what it is that you want to improve. How do you want to improve it? What do you want to focus on? Say you've scored low on frequency of training, and you're not happy with that. You believe that you need to have more training involved. Then you develop an action plan revolved around that. You put the steps in motion, how you're going to achieve that. And then, of course, you need to generate involvement. Again, this goes back to getting people involved in this culture change, because people are key here. So involving the right people that will be affected by this, is absolute key. Get their opinion, get their input, get their ideas, and see how they will be impacted because people will resist change a lot less if they understand it. Now, here's something about culture change that we need to talk about. So there's this quote by Shine. Learning only happens when survival anxiety, SA, is greater than learning anxiety. Either you increase survival anxiety by threatening people with loss of jobs or valued rewards, or decrease learning anxiety by creating a safer environment for unlearning and new learning. So this relates to reducing barriers and risks, so reducing the learning anxiety. Now, one way to understand that is that people, as a general rule, are not very willing to change. So if something works okay but not great, they will probably want to continue doing that. So when you're presenting your case for change, you have to understand that you will probably be met with a lot of learning anxiety. So people that are simply not very willing to take that extra step. Perhaps they're not interested in more training. Perhaps they don't think they're able to understand the new information. So you need to make them feel safe. You need to provide a form of psychological safety for them so that they feel comfortable. Now, of course, you also have to increase survival anxiety. So you have to present your case in a way that people understand that this is absolutely crucial for them and for their jobs. Sometimes people do this by simply threatening, right? So they say, okay, if you don't do this, you're going to get fired. But in reality, that is not the most effective way. Because yes, of course, if people feel that they're going to lose their jobs, they will do the change. But if you want them to really take it on board, it's done in a much better way if you actually just decrease learning anxiety and make people feel safe around those concepts. So one way, for example, of doing that, using the data, is to reduce the barriers and risks. So in the data, you will get a score for your barriers, your cultural barriers. So that could tell you a little bit what it is that people feel stands in the way. So for example, maybe you will have an issue regarding time, where a lot of people are identifying time as a barrier to culture. So that could be something to address when you're looking to improve your scores, in particular when it comes to improving your element scores, lower scoring elements as well as the lower scoring dimensions. Now, once you've done all that, you've identified those barriers, you've explained them to employees, you have tackled them head on, how you're going to reduce them. Of course, you then also need to implement the revised plan. So again, this goes back to working together throughout the whole process, involving the right people, getting their feedback, taking that feedback on board, and implementing what needs to be implemented. Once you've done that, it will then become obviously very important to evaluate this plan and also reinforce it as you go along, and also keeping the momentum going. So a change in group performance is frequently short-lived. After a shot in the arm, group life soon returns to the previous level. It does not suffice to define the objective of a planned change. Permanency of the new level should be included in the objective. So this is from Lewin, who is also one of the godfathers of organizational culture. And this is something to keep in mind and to remember. Of course, depending on what it is you're trying to change and how, people fall back to their old habits very, very quickly. And sometimes you gather momentum, you involve the right people, everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. But if there's no reinforcement, if there's no suggestions how you're going to continue this, it will not be very long-lived. People will fall back to old habits, old way of doing things. They will stop focusing on the new initiatives that you've implemented. So it's always very, very important to keep that momentum going, to do evaluations that are ongoing, to always see, are you meeting the targets that you set for yourself after 3 months, after 5 months, after 7 months. And also, of course, what we do with the survey, and the reason why we have designed it the way that we have designed it, is that we always suggest to our clients to take the survey once a year as well. Because then you can really see after a year if the changes that you've implemented, if the improvement strategies that you've put in place, if they've actually borne any effect. So if we did the assessment after 3 months, we would be quite confident in saying, yes, of course, because that will be quite new, will be something in people's heads. But it's only after a year that you'll be able to see if those changes have really taken, place in the organization in the way you want them to take, if they've sort of grown the roots as you wish them. And that's why we say that you have to take it on a yearly basis so that you can see how your action planning and how your strategies and what kind of a fruit it's born. So that concludes our session for the day. Thank you very much for joining us. If you would like more information, please log on to our website, cultureexcellence.com, where we have both case studies available and lots of materials there, or please go to BRCGS.com for additional information on the program and the journey you can undertake. Thank you very much for joining us today.